The doctor who illegally supplied Friends star Matthew Perry with ketamine before his overdose is pleading guilty. Dr. Salvador Plasencia could go to prison for decades. We're breaking down his plea deal and what it means for the 4 other people who were charged in connection to the actor's death, including the woman dubbed the Ketamine Queen. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. Dr. Salvador Plasencia is one of 2 doctors who were charged in connection to Matthew Perry's death, and he's the one who texted another doctor calling Matthew Perry a moron in talking about how much money he thought he could get out of the actor. Here's a picture of Dr. Plasencia. He owned an urgent care clinic in Malibu. Now, before we talk about the charges that he is pleading guilty to, let's go back to when he first entered the life of Matthew Perry, and it wasn't long before the actor died. Perry, of course, a beloved actor. He notably was Chandler Bing on Friends, and he appeared in movies like The Whole 9 Yards with Bruce Willis. But for as much as he played characters who brought joy to so many people, it wasn't a secret. Matthew Perry had demons. He struggled with alcohol addiction and drug addiction for decades. On October 28, 2023, Matthew Perry died from an overdose. He was found dead in a jacuzzi of his home in Los Angeles. At the time, people wondered if Perry had perhaps drowned. This case was considered open until an autopsy came back and showed that Perry had died from having acute effects of ketamine in his system. Ketamine is an FDA-approved anesthetic that can be prescribed to treat mental illness, and Perry was using it to treat depression and anxiety. But the doses that killed him, according to the DOJ, were not the ones prescribed by a doctor. The Justice Department launched an investigation into Perry's death and uncovered a shocking network of people, including doctors, who not just supplied ketamine to the actor, but took advantage of someone who had a lot of money and an out-of-control dependence on ketamine, including Dr. Plasencia.
This network included a live-in assistant, various go-betweens, 2 medical doctors, and a major source of drug supply known as, quote, the Ketamine Queen. We charged 5 defendants in this matter. These defendants took advantage of Mr. Perry's addiction issues to enrich themselves. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They knew what they were doing was risking great danger to Mr. Perry, but they did it anyways. In the end, these defendants were more interested in profiting off Mr. Perry than caring for his well-being.
And this is where Dr. Salvador Plasencia comes into the story and sadly into Matthew Perry's life. He again owned that urgent care in a ritzy part of Southern California, Malibu, and according to the plea agreement, Dr. Plasencia says he was introduced to Perry on September 30th, 2023. That's less than a month before Perry died. Perry, according to the plea deal, was a, quote, high-profile person who was willing to pay, quote, cash and lots of thousands for ketamine. Dr. Plasencia worked with Perry's live-in assistant, Kenneth Iwamasa, and another doctor, Mark Chavez, who you see here, to sell Perry ketamine in the month leading up to his death. 2 others were charged in connection to this scheme, including the woman who was dubbed the Ketamine Queen. I'll talk about where her case stands in just a moment. Dr. Chavez previously owned a ketamine clinic in Southern California, so he had access to ketamine. Well, if you're like me, you do care about what you put into your body, but finding high quality groceries at an affordable price can be really hard. That is where Thrive Market comes in. Thrive Market is a great online grocery store where you can shop for healthy and sustainable products, all delivered right to your door. And really the best part is Thrive Market does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. It restricts over 1,000 questionable ingredients. This is one product I really like right now. It's a little over $5. These organic date pops, these ones come in cinnamon bun flavors. They're really tasty, great energy bites to help get you through the day. With Thrive Market, you can shop everything from pantry staples and snacks to personal care items, all from the comfort of your own home. Plus, their commitment to sustainability means not only are you taking care of yourself, but you're taking care of the planet as well. They have a website that is super easy to use and an app. You can filter by dietary preferences. Maybe you're keto, gluten-free, vegan, or just trying to make healthier swaps like I am. Thrive Market has something for you. So if you're ready to make healthy shopping as easy as just a few clicks, check out Thrive Market. You can scan the QR code on your screen or click the link in the description of this video or go to thrivemarket.com/onthecase. You'll get 30% off your first order and a free gift when you join. Dr. Plasencia said that Perry paid him thousands of dollars in cash for 20 vials of the drug. According to the Department of Justice, when Plasencia realized just how lucrative selling ketamine to Perry could be, he texted Chavez, quote, "I wonder how much this moron will pay," and, quote, "let's find out." In Plasencia's deal, he admitted to visiting Perry's house twice and injecting him with ketamine. He also showed the assistant Iwamasa how to inject it into Perry. The doctor also said he once injected ketamine into Perry in the parking lot of the Long Beach Aquarium. Now, the day before Perry was killed by ketamine, according to this plea deal, Plasencia texted Iwamasa, quote, "I know you mentioned taking a break. I've been stocking up on the meanwhile. I'm not sure when you guys plan to resume, but in case it's when I'm out of town this weekend, I have left supplies with a nurse of mine. I can always let her know the plan." The doctor used his DEA license to get the drugs, and this really shows that he was in it for the money and was willing to give Perry ketamine no matter the health consequences, as long as Perry would continue to pay. Dr. Plasencia is the fourth out of 5 people who have been charged in connection to Perry's death to take a plea deal. Dr. Chavez pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiring to distribute ketamine in October of last year. He could face up to 10 years in prison. He's set to be sentenced in September. The live-in assistant, Kenneth Iwamasa, he pled guilty to a count of conspiracy to distribute ketamine causing death. He faces up to 15 years in prison. He is set to be sentenced in November of this year. Then Dr. Plasencia, he faces up to 40 years in prison in this deal. He's expected to plead guilty to 4 counts of distribution of ketamine. This would also carry up to a $2 million fine. He was slated to go on trial in August. The doctor's plea deal also points out that the ketamine he provided Perry is not the specific dose that killed the actor. That was provided by Eric Fleming. Fleming also took a plea deal for a count of conspiracy to distribute ketamine. He gave Perry's assistant 50 vials of the drug. That's more than twice the amount that the doctor said that he gave Perry. Half of those doses that Fleming gave to Iwamasa came 4 days before Perry's death. Now, Fleming could go to prison for 25 years. He's set to be sentenced in November as well. Fleming says he got those drugs from a woman known as the ketamine queen of North Hollywood. The one person left who was charged in connection to Perry's death, who has not taken a plea deal and is steaming ahead to an August trial, having entered a not guilty plea. The ketamine queen's real name is Jasveen Sangha. According to prosecutors, she sold large amounts of drugs from her house in North Hollywood and worked with Fleming to get Perry and his assistant the 50 vials of ketamine, including the doses that took Perry's life. Sangha is facing several charges, including a count of conspiracy to distribute ketamine and a charge of maintaining a drug-involved premises, 1 count of possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine, 1 count of possession of intent to distribute ketamine, and 5 counts of distribution of ketamine. Again, she has pleaded not guilty and has not, at the time of this recording, taken a deal. Joining us now is criminal defense attorney Mauricio Padilla. Thank you for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. Always great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Another plea deal, 4 out of 5 now of the people who have been charged in connection to Matthew Perry's death. What do you make of what Dr. Salvador Plasencia is pleading guilty to? 4 counts of distributing ketamine.
I think it's not rare to see everybody line up. When you have one person like the ketamine queen, as we're calling her, and she's steadfast, she's going to trial. Usually, most of the people, the co-defendants, are going to line up and they're going to take pleas, and that's what's happening in this particular case, especially in a case like this one, which pretty much involves a beloved celebrity and the fact that he called him a moron in a text. And that's not a small thing. When you're a doctor and they have you on record, that type of evidence, that kind of callous disregard for someone, and then that person dies, that carries a lot of weight. It's just a text message, but it carries a lot of weight. It would have carried a lot of weight in front of a jury, and it's going to carry a lot of weight in front of the judge when it comes time to sentence him. So I'm not shocked that he did take a deal.
So he faces, and eventually we'll figure out when he's sentenced, up to 40 years in prison on these 4 counts. What goes into what his sentence could be? Is that on the judge to then make the decision about how long he goes to prison for?
Yeah, the way it works is there's guidelines. So there's a guidelines. A federal judge could sentence you, at any to whatever. Usually when you take a plea, that's one of the things that they want you to clearly understand, that no matter what your guidelines are, that they can sentence you to whatever they want. I'm not really sure if this is in federal or state court, but either way, those guidelines are there for the court to basically look at, but they can always sentence you over and above it if they give reasons. And there's many reasons in this case, including the fact that someone died. He didn't die from the drugs specifically that Dr. Plasencia gave him, and I think that's something that's going to be part of his saving grace when it comes time to sentencing. The Jasmine ketamine queen lady, I think she's going to really have a really hard time at trial and a really hard time at sentencing, simply because of the facts of the case.
Why do you think she is still pleading not guilty and heading, it seems, full steam ahead to a trial?
Well, it could be a combination of things. Maybe they're not making her an offer. Well, it's going to be they're not making her an offer she's willing to accept. The issue is whether her mind is in the right place. A lot of people think that, I could fight this, I could win. A lot of people don't really, when they're when they're in her position, they are not ready to, maybe do a decade in prison or 8 years in prison, and they're refusing to understand the position that they're in and the negative aspects that they're going to have to face at trial. So, that's partly probably why she's going to trial. I know that they have a lot of evidence against her, and listen, when you're dealing with a celebrity victim, like in this case, and someone that was pretty much beloved. Before he died, he had a best-selling book. People really loved him. He was an addict. Everybody knew that he suffered from addiction. So, just because it's ketamine, if it would be heroin, people would be like, all right, well, you're going to get 20 years. It's ketamine. It's a drug. You gave him a drug, and because you gave him that drug, he died. So I mean, I may be oversimplifying it, but at the end of the day, people lost someone that they really cared about, and eventually someone's gonna have to pay for it. So, listen, if I was her attorney, I would obviously be trying to negotiate a deal and because at the end of the day, when you take these things to trial, there's always the probability that you're going to lose statistically.
Because I imagine too, I mean, in her case, you have Eric Fleming, who's the person who I guess actually gave the drugs to the live-in assistant of Matthew Perry, who then gave him the dose that would kill him. But then he was working apparently on behalf of the ketamine queen, and she seems to be the head of all of this, as well as was involved in some other stuff related to drugs, it seems, that the government wants to go after her for. In terms of Dr. Plasencia, why is he facing, I mean, 40 years is a long time in prison. Clearly those text messages are very damning, but he didn't give the dose to Matthew Perry that killed him. Why is the government seeming to target him at this point, he's facing the most prison time of anybody who's taken a plea deal?
Right. Well, that's because if he's facing 4 counts of distributing ketamine, they could be stacking them, so it could be 10 years per count. The reality is that when someone tells you what the maximum amount of years that you're facing is, it's not going to be that. It's something that ethically lawyers have to tell their clients, what the maximum is. And for the purposes of, the news reporting it, they can always, they have to take into consideration what the maximum is. But at the end of the day, it's not a probability that he's going to get the maximum. As a matter of fact, it's something that rarely happens. And especially with somebody, I don't believe he has an extensive criminal history at all. So there's a lot of factors that go into why a judge wouldn't give him the maximum. And then even though judges can sentence you to whatever they want, they have to justify it on the record. So if they deviate, if there's an upward deviation and the judge doesn't really have, grounds, it's something that's appealable, and it often is.
And I also think of these text messages, and he held out for a pretty long time until he agreed to this plea deal that we first learned about last night. But you read the text messages, and it was clear that he recognized that Matthew Perry was going to pay a lot of money for ketamine, and he calls him a moron. I mean, as if you were his defense attorney, the second those text messages come out, not to mention there's other texts that show that when Matthew Perry even wanted to take a break, He was like, hey, I have the stuff when you're ready to come back to me again, almost like he's a drug dealer. If you're his defense attorney, what is the conversation like the second that those text messages came to light?
Listen, I'm very honest with my clients from the beginning. I don't like to highlight things that shouldn't be highlighted, and I like to focus on the negative because at the end of the day, as a criminal defense attorney, I want in my closing argument, I'm going to mention the worst thing first. They call it rushing to the bummer. And with my clients in an intake, I like to focus on the worst things first because at the end of the day, we're trying to help people out of serious problems. So the conversation would have been, listen, these text messages are bad. And at the end of the day, a jury reads that and they look at you and they don't like you. And if a jury doesn't like you, they convict you. It's something that I say often when I do these types of shows, and it's something that I live it in my practice. So part of successfully representing somebody at trial is to get the jury to simply like you. And with text messages like that, it looks like it was going to be an uphill battle for him at trial.
And what's shocking too is like you look at his picture. He's got the white coat on, he's got the smile. I mean, he looks like the type of guy that you would trust as a doctor, which makes in some ways just watching this from the outside even more shocking because he very quickly seems to realize that there was a business opportunity with Matthew Perry. When you look at the charges he was facing and what his sentence could be, how much does the fact that he was the doctor, he was somebody that people were supposed to be able to trust, that Matthew Perry, who suffered from addiction, should have been able to trust, how much does the fact that he failed in terms of being that trustworthy person to almost a lethal level, how could that factor into what the judge decided his prison sentence could be?
That's going to be probably the first or second sentence out of the prosecutor's mouth, and it's probably going to be the first or second sentence out of the judge's mouth during sentencing. They're going to highlight on you were a person of trust. You're a person that took an oath to do the opposite of what you did. So that's something that he's going to have to deal with at sentencing. And yeah, they're going to focus a lot on that because, as they should, this is somebody that, people entrusted themselves, their family to help. And then you mocked them and you were looking out financially for yourself. And that's a big problem with the ketamine queen, because during her trial, the amount of money that she profited from this is relevant and the jury's going to see it. So they're going to see someone died, and they're going to see all the fruits of that tree that you live in this beautiful house, the mansions, the sports cars, all of those things that she was able to accumulate, the wealth that she was able to accumulate by committing these crimes is going to be tied into it. And the jury's going to be looking at her like, man, you're like, you're a villain in a James Bond movie. So that's an important thing that juries look at.
And as I was kind of just reading through this again last night, when this news broke about this plea deal, and Jasveen Sangha is her name, but the government, in its release when she was charged, straight up called her the ketamine queen. Like, I mean, right out of the gate. And that's like what you remember her for as she heads to trial. How much of a problem is just that nickname being out in the public, and likely whoever's on a jury has heard of Matthew Perry and will hear during this trial that she was nicknamed the ketamine queen. If you're a criminal defense attorney, that seems like something pretty difficult to fight back against.
The problem is that when you deal with these high-profile cases, the rule regarding pre-trial publicity is a gray area. But basically, it says that neither the defense or the prosecution should say anything that could possibly affect the way that a jury is going to react to a case. That's very gray, and obviously giving her that nickname, in my opinion, violates that. But you know what? Prosecutors that talk before trial often do that. So, in my opinion, the prosecution should be very limited in what they could say, because you're right. That type of a nickname will stick with you throughout the entire case. And once you have that type of name associated with you, it's hard to get rid of. And you're right. Jurors watch the news. They're on Instagram. They're checking out social media. And unfortunately, even while during the trial, that's a fact. It's a reality that they still do it even though they're not supposed to. So you have to deal with pre-trial publicity, and you have to deal with publicity during the trial. As far as I'm concerned, for the prosecution to nickname a defendant like that publicly in a public statement is a violation of the pre-trial publicity rule. It just goes unchecked, and it really shouldn't, because it really does affect a defense attorney's ability to properly represent their client in a high-profile criminal case.
Yeah, and it seems that the prosecution has a strong case against her at this point, but it is something if you're a juror and you've never met this person before in your life or seen her and they're like, well, she was known as the ketamine queen, that's a hard thing to push back from. In terms of a jury and her trial, I mean, Matthew Perry was beloved by a lot of people. Friends is one of the most watched shows of all time. He has this memoir coming out. What could you reasonably, if you were the defense, expect of a juror in terms of what they know about Matthew Perry, about whether they liked Matthew Perry? What type of awareness could you actually expect, knowing that most people will probably know who he was?
What happens in cases like this is that they're going to have waves during jury selection of just raise your hand if you know about this case, raise your hand if you know who Matthew Perry is, and then have people individually tell you how they feel about him. Did they watch the show? Did they read his memoirs? To find out whether or not they're going to be able to be non-prejudiced when it comes time to make a decision. So the problem is that jurors sometimes don't honestly say the answer, and they just give the answer that they feel that they're expected to give. And that's really the issue with jury selection, is to get to the point as an attorney where you're not asking what you think should be asked. You're asking those questions so that you can get into the mind of the juror to find out what you really think. And part of that is having a dialogue during voir dire where they feel comfortable with opening up. Because if I just cold ask you a question straight up, do you think the fact that you watch Friends is going to affect your ability to be fair and impartial? You'll be like, no, it won't. No, it won't. But you don't want that. You want them to start talking, and you want to really get to the truth of what's inside their, in their head and in their heart regarding the case. Because if not, you're just going through the motions and you're not really learning about the people that are going to ultimately decide the fate of your client.
And it seems like, just based off the plea deals and what we've learned, you have this personal live-in assistant to Matthew Perry who was able to get the drugs from not just Dr. Plasencia, but then the ketamine queen allegedly at this point as well. The fact that you see 4 out of 5 plea deals, how likely is it that those people are, in terms of this deal, going to have to testify against Sangha when she goes to trial?
100%. They're going to, part of that deal was you got to get up there, you're going to say the truth, and you're going to say the whole truth about everybody. So I would be shocked if all 4 of those people are not going to testify against her, which makes the case against her even stronger and defending that case even more difficult. I mean, I know you could always, you were looking at criminal charges yourself. You're a rat. You're cooperating to save your own skin. Yeah, you could say it once, you could say it twice, but when you're saying it 4 times, the jury's like, how many people are lying here? Or is she guilty? And that's something that they're going to have to deal with. It's already getting voluminous, the amount of cooperatives, and they have everybody in the chain, all the way up to the queen pin.
What's the conversation if you were, once again, her defense attorney, and knowing, just based off the plea deals, it seems that the government knows how many vials of ketamine were given to Matthew Perry that were not the prescribed kind that he was on to treat depression, the amount of money that everybody involved was receiving from Matthew Perry. You now have these 4 plea deals. 4 out of 5 people have been charged. They've lined up for a plea deal. And now it seems that she's still heading to trial. I mean, if you're the criminal defense attorney today, what are you doing? And what's the conversation like with your client?
Well, look, everybody deserves their day in court. And some people, many people, even faced with evidence as like the evidence that she's faced with, are like, no, I'm innocent. And if your client is sticking to that and they want a trial, then as long as you alert them of the probabilities, the possibilities, and all the negative things, as a criminal defense attorney, you don't want to deprive your client of their day in court, because we all know that at the end of the day, when your freedom depends on those people in the jury box, 6, 12, 14, however many people are in that jury box, you never know what's going to happen. I have lost the ones that I should have I've lost the ones that I should have won, and I've won some that I should have lost. And everybody that does what I do knows that there's completely no way to predict what's going to happen. So there's always a hope that you could possibly win, and you don't want to deprive your client of that. So as long as you tell her, and she's based in reality, this is what you're facing, then listen, if she wants it, she wants it. And when you're dealing with a case like this, where it's a high profile case, criminal defense attorneys like these types of cases. So, it's exciting for the criminal defense attorney to have that day in court. And I'm sure that they're looking forward to it.
Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, it's going to be a high-profile trial for sure, just based off of how beloved Matthew Perry was, and then it seems like some of the characters coming into play. And I mean, those text messages are just so damning each time that you read them. Mauricio Padilla, criminal defense attorney. Thanks for coming on with us today. We always appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Dr. Plasencia is expected to go in front of a judge under this plea deal at a later date. As for the ketamine queen, Jasveen Sangha, her trial is expected to start in August. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.